Okay. Hey, Arlene. Oh, I don't hear you. Hang on. Why don't I hear? Oh, you're muted. Unmute. Unmute, Arlene.
There we go.
There you go.
So Brad's not here yet?
No, he's got 2 minutes.
Okay.
But Seema's already in the. She came on at 7:11, and I sent her a message, and I said, "You are very early. You can wait in the waiting room, but I'm not letting people in till 7:20 or 7:25. So it's up to you what you want to do." I said 5 or 10 minutes. I'll be letting people in.
So are you going to get a break this summer from all that you're doing?
I don't know. I'm taking a week or I don't know if I'm taking a week, maybe a few days in October, because we're going back down to Florida, Becca and I, for the maybe my husband too, for the wedding of the girl we went to buy the dress with back in April. So I don't know. I just want to go to Israel.
Hey, you know something? I've been having 2 terrible weeks. I mean, really terrible. But the other day, my son called, and I knew it was coming, but I didn't know when. My kids are moving from Virginia to Rhode Island.
That's great. Oh, you got to be so excited.
I am beyond excited.
Yeah, you're beyond. Yeah, I get that. Oh my God. You drive, right, Arlene?
I'm sorry?
You drive, right?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so you would have no problem hopping in the car and going to Rhode Island.
Listen, when they were up in Maine,
you were driving there.
Hours to see them there. So no, I wouldn't have any problem. I said to him, it was really funny. I said, while you're looking at houses, make sure you look at either ranch houses or houses with a main with the master bedroom and bath on the first floor, because I have walking steps. He started telling me.
Well, yeah, as we get older, that's what happens.
But the cost of homes is so outrageous.
I have very steep stairs in our house, like 13 steps, and they're very steep. And going up and down the stairs is challenging because I'm having trouble with my knees.
Well, you know,
it's part of the aging process.
So. That's how it started. So put in a chair, a glide.
I want to get a stair chair, but I'm not there yet. I don't think insurance will cover it yet.
Insurance didn't cover mine, but we put it in. Well, my husband used it before me, and I used it until after he passed away.
Hold on, what? Schools are having early dismissal. Why? What channel are you on? That's so weird. What's tomorrow? June 7th. Maybe is the weather supposed to be bad tomorrow? Kids, they're having mics on CBS, and there's like these alerts about school closings tomorrow.
Really? Well, there's a lot of thunder here.
You have a lot of thunder there now?
A lot of thunder.
But thunderstorm doesn't usually shut down a school.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, Brad, now you're making me nervous.
Not unless there's something going on in the school.
I'm showing sun all day tomorrow. I don't know. What schools are you seeing, Mike?
Seymour, Simsbury,
Okay, it's that area.
Southington,
Oh, good.
Windsor,
2 people entered. Where's? Oh, it's
Manchester.
Brad. Yay, he's here.
Waukesha.
Brad is
Farmington.
here. Okay, so it's all right, Mike. I don't want to hear anymore. I got my guy.
Hello.
Hey, Brad, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm
Hi.
good.
How's everybody?
I
We
have
are
to tell
good.
you don't look like I don't know what I expected, but I just didn't expect you to look like this.
You look just like I expected.
Is that good or bad? I don't know what to say about that.
There's
It's all
nothing
good.
bad
Your
about
face
it.
matches your voice.
Nothing bad about it at all.
So I have one person in the waiting room, and I already sent. Came on at 7:11. I told you, Brad, these people come very early. So I sent her a message, and I said, "Okay, so I'm going to let people in around 7:20, 7:25. So you can either hang out in the waiting room or come back in 5 to 10 minutes."
Either way.
Yep. So I think she's hanging out.
Okay.
And where am I going to find this admit? Because for all the Zoom,
It's just gonna pop up. Oh, I didn't make you a. Wait, I have to make you a. What do you call it? A co-host, and then you'll see it. Brad, would you like to be co-host as well?
There it is.
Sure.
You are.
Okay, great.
There you go.
It doesn't pay much.
Yeah, it doesn't pay anything.
You know, it's the responsibility that I want, really, more than the money.
Right. Well, you can help us let people in.
There we go.
You see anybody dangling, feel free to let them in.
Okay, but not yet, because I see that Seema Stein.
Seema Stein. Yeah, she's like,
there.
yeah. She
Not
came
going there.
7-11. I'm telling you, 7-11.
Tell me
Okay.
something. Neil Friedman mentioned way back when I first got the film that Tamar was going to have a television show.
Possibly. We're still talking about it.
Okay.
Sometimes the decisions are not in our hands.
There's a lot of decisions in life that aren't in our hands.
Oh.
Yeah.
Most of them.
Yeah, no, it's
Brad,
it's something we've been discussing. Yeah.
I wanted to clarify something. I know that you were concerned because we had kept Tamar on some of the information. She was not on.
Okay.
She was only on the very first postcard, not after. But what I noticed is she was still on the Zoom call. I caught that today. I didn't realize. So I took her off, and I will make an announcement when people come on before we start that it was my error that I left her on. I meant to take her. I thought I did take her off, but clearly
I just don't want people to be disappointed.
No, I understand. But you know what? You're amazing. So they don't get to.
I appreciate that. But, sometimes they just, and I can't blame them. You spend 90 minutes falling in love.
You're a celebrity yourself.
What's that?
What? I didn't catch that.
No, I said you spend 90 minutes falling in love with Tamar, and then you think you're going to talk to her, and you don't. Sometimes people get a little
it can be a little disappointing, but they'll be fine. They'll deal.
I hope so.
Because you also have the director who,
there we go.
Put that film together. It was really. I watched it again last night. It was so good.
Thank you.
It was, and it sends a very powerful message.
She's a force to be reckoned with.
She is a force of nature.
Yes, she
really is. And I cannot emphasize strongly enough how much fun I had making this film.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
How old is she?
Seems like she's a lot of fun.
How old is she?
Yes.
What's your guess?
Late 30s?
Oh, I was going to say in her mid to late 20s.
She just turned 43.
Oh, you're kidding.
Nope.
When my daughter tells me that I don't look my age, that's one thing, but my God,
she looks very young, and she could be anywhere from 25 to 40.
Right, because of her energy and her spirit.
Yeah, she looks very young.
Well, that'll pay off when she gets older.
Yeah. Yeah.
It surely will.
Hopefully.
Now I'm surprised that I don't have people banging down the door to come in. I only still have Seema.
Well.
But I know we have 30 people registered, so.
Well, you have 30 households registered.
30 households, right. And that includes the 3 of us, so 27.
Right. But there are,
I
The
know, but our
average-
community always comes on, like we got SEMA at 7-Eleven.
the average is a couple, maybe 3 or 4 in
Yeah.
one house watching.
Yeah.
So that's why we can't get an
Oh God, don't
accurate.
go breaking up now. What did you say? I'm sorry.
I
My
said
thing
the
broke up.
average house would be, probably most would be 2 to 3 people, possibly 4, depending on who lives in that house.
Right.
I mean, it's a couple, it's their kids or whatever.
All right. If I take off my backdrop, what do I see? Because it may be taking bandwidth, which makes this problematic. Yeah, I'm not a fan.
Yay.
Yeah, but pillows behind me.
Hey, look at mine on this. This is in my spare bedroom, so I got pillows on mine too.
Well, if I start breaking up, you guys let me know, and then I'll take the backdrop off.
Why does that affect the,
Apparently, everybody tells me it affects bandwidth. So when you start breaking up, it's because it's using too much bandwidth.
oh,
I don't know. I just listen to what people tell me.
okay.
I don't know. So I have all the questions you sent me, Brett, and a couple of my own.
Right.
Oh, and I want to get to the screen where I introduced you. Hang on, I got to find that. So that's ready to go.
When does this start recording?
It's recording. It's been recording since I came on at 7.
All right, because I
10.
haven't clicked.
We'll take out the beginning of this. You know, we'll have Becca just cut out the first 10 or 15 minutes,
Yeah,
and that way it'll just be the call itself.
okay.
Okay. But I didn't want to take the chance of not recording it and then forgetting, which has happened to me when the call starts, then I forget to record and end up recording in the middle. So yeah, I'm just leaving it on, and then we'll have Becca take it off.
Okay.
So just a few minutes. So I didn't print up my intro. That's going to be right on the screen, and that way I'll be like looking right in the camera, sort of. But the questions are right next to me. So let me just look at my intro again.
I still can't believe how old she is. That's incredible. She really, I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm usually pretty good at
No,
telling
she
age.
looks very young. She looks young. Yeah, she had they had a surprise 40th birthday party for her
Uh-huh.
3 years ago, which I went to. And so I flew from New York to Chicago. And, you know, other than Tamar's house, I don't really have a lot of places to stay there. So I met up with a cousin and we were having lunch, and Tamar called me. And I said, I can't really talk right now. I'm busy with my kids, because I didn't want her to know that I was in Chicago.
Right.
And she was like, what? And I said, no, I'll talk to you later. And I hung up. And then I was supposed to go to Kendra's house, and Kendra is in the movie.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. So I ended up talking with Tamar's son, Max, and he said, well, just come here. I said, wait, you want me to hide from your mom
In your
in
house.
the house? He's like, she never comes to the basement. Like, she's not going to be home. You'll just come here. So I stayed in her basement for a couple of hours before the party. And then she didn't know I was there. And then when she saw me at the party, she was angry at me for hanging up on her when she called earlier.
Right. That's so funny.
Yeah.
All right. So people are starting to pop
I
in.
know, and I don't have
I'm gonna
admit
let
on
them
here
in.
anymore.
I'm going to let them in. Is that okay, Brad?
Sure.
Okay.
Marcia,
What?
there's no word admit anywhere on my screen.
Okay. So when you see it should come up where you see participants, right? And then you just let them in.
All right, but it's not on this screen.
You should see it on your screen like with participants. But that's all right. I've
Oh,
got it.
here, this.
There you go.
All right.
And if you click that, and then they'll come in, like you'll see above where you see all the participants listed, you'll see people popping up, and then you just admit.
Okay.
But it should also pop up on your screen. It pops up on mine. Hello, Elise. Hello, Marvin. And hello, Seema.
Hi.
Thank you for your patience, especially Seema.
Hello, Marcia. That's quite a background you have.
That's because that's where I want to be right now.
I can't quite tell where it is.
It's Haifa. It's the Baha'i Gardens and with the naval base underneath.
Looks lovely.
It's gorgeous.
Well, you're looking pretty gorgeous tonight too, my dear. Whereas I
Thank you,
just
Elise.
had my garden, so.
That's okay. It's a
Yeah.
relaxed evening.
Everybody's been in their garden today but me.
I don't garden.
But my yard needed work.
My sister's the gardener, not me. She got all my mother's domestic genes. I got none of them.
My
There
my
are
daughter
cats more
lives
domestic than me.
my daughter lives in Calgary, in Alberta, Canada. And yesterday I got a virtual tour of her vegetable garden and the vegetables she's already taken out. And she even grows chamomile and bergamot for her tea. I mean, she's amazing. Just amazing. Hi, Gail.
So Elisa, I'm going to mute you because everyone's being muted upon arrival. That way I won't have to try and remember after.
Hey, Seema, are you going to show us your face?
To mute me.
I was just going to say you're muted.
Yeah, I muted me instead of Elise.
Sorry, yes, I was doing something else.
Hi.
That's fine. You're
Hi,
allowed. Seema.
everybody.
Hi, Seema.
Thank you.
Arlene, do you see people popping up on
I
your screen?
do. Yep.
You do. Good. Okay. They're coming in slow, so I can grab them. It's only when they come in a lot that you can jump in.
Hi, Marsh.
Hey, Karen, how you
Hi,
doing?
Karen.
I'm good. I'm good.
I thought it was going to be Aaron.
Well, it's gonna be. It's gonna be both of us.
Okay,
Just
good.
because it says Aaron.
Right, right. I wasn't sure. So we're just going to give people a chance to get on. We'll give it a few
Okay.
more minutes, probably about another 5 minutes, so people can get on before we start.
Aaron says you're very good at this.
Oh, we got on the last one?
Yes.
He was
Tell him I
impressed.
said thank you. Tell him I said thanks. Yes, he wrote me a really nice email after the first one.
We're all developing new skills.
Mm-hmm.
The older we get, the
Yeah.
better we get,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
I agree. Some days.
We'll give it till 7:35. And then people can just hop on whenever. And
Hi, Ron.
Hello, everybody.
hey, Ron.
How are you?
Good. Great.
I haven't seen you forever.
Forever?
Forever.
Never.
At least a month. Well,
No, I haven't seen you for longer than that.
oh,
I see you, Ron,
now I
but
see
Karen
who's
hasn't.
now I see who's talking.
Yeah, it's Karen.
Yes. Yes, I haven't seen you for a long time.
There you go.
Well,
My
today's your
life has
lucky
been-
day.
Yeah. To see all of yous. Yeah. Looking forward to this. Hope you're well, Karen. Hope everybody's doing well.
Yeah.
Not good.
You too, you and your family. We're good.
Is the pandemic over?
Almost. At least I'd like to think so.
You know, my adult kids, when I say adult, I'm talking in their 40s. They've only gotten their first shot there because they can't get the vaccine
Where are they?
in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Oh, right. And Canada's, yeah. I've heard that.
Oh, yeah, Canada's having a problem.
Yes.
Well, my
My
kids are all
nephew moved
vaxxed,
there. Go ahead, Karen.
and 2 of my grandchildren are vaxxed.
Oh, that's wonderful.
My nephew moved
Yeah.
to Canada and he's
Yeah.
not happy.
Your nephew moved where?
To Canada.
Marsh, where did your nephew? Oh,
To Canada. My sister's son.
Where in Canada, Marcia?
Oh, good. Oh, Toronto. Toronto. I had to think for a
Oh.
second. And it's such a great city, but
It's a
it was
beautiful
COVID. It was
city.
a lot of things that a lot of contributing factors why he's not happy. But hopefully it'll get better.
Okay.
Okay, I'm giving it 2 more minutes.
Mute myself here.
And if everyone could mute yourselves, that would be great. Because when we start, I want everybody to be muted. Just better. You also might want to put your view on speaker view. It's in the top right. Okay, I'm going to start. I'm going to let everybody else just start coming in on their own whenever they show up. So the first thing I want to tell everyone is I had left on the description on Zoom that we were going to meet with Brad Rothschild and with Tamara Manasseh. How does she pronounce it, Brad?
Manasseh.
Manasseh. Okay. So I should have taken Tamar off about, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, because we found out she was doing a filming or something that was holding her up from being here. So she will not be with us tonight. I'm hoping that enough of the literature went out that didn't have her name that people aren't confused, but I just wanted to put that out there. And I would like to now formally introduce Brad Rothschild to everyone. I had the pleasure of meeting with Brad yesterday. We had a conversation. So I want to welcome you all. Good evening to this wonderful event. It is with great pleasure that I introduce you to director and producer Brad Rothschild. Brad is an award-winning filmmaker whose work focuses on the role of the individual in society. He received a master's in international affairs and an MBA, both from Columbia University. In the mid-1990s, he served as the speechwriter and director of communications for the Mission of Israel to the United Nations. Brad produced the documentary feature Kinderblock 66, Return to Buchenwald. The film has screened in the Jerusalem Film Festival and over 20 festivals in the United States and around the world. Brad directed the documentary film African Exodus about the plight of Israel's African refugees and the documentary film Tree Man about the people who come to New York City to sell Christmas trees every holiday season. Tree Man won the Audience Award at the St. Lawrence International Film Festival and screened on Netflix. Brad's written work has appeared in The Atlantic, Foreign Policy, The Huffington Post, and The Times of Israel. So, Brad, I'm going to turn it over to you, but please tell us how you first got involved with filmmaking and how you met Tamar and became involved in this amazing project and fabulous film.
Thank you, Marcia. It was nice speaking with you the other day, and it's nice to be here with all of you tonight. So I'll tell you a little bit about how I got into filmmaking, and I'll tell you more about how this film came about. And I was telling this to Marcia the other day because she asked me, you have this background that does not say filmmaker, so how did you become a filmmaker? And I told her the truth, which is that I was working at Citigroup, and I wasn't feeling completely fulfilled in my job. And for somebody with a full-time job and a family, I found myself spending my free time writing screenplays. And I got to the point where I showed a screenplay that I had written to one of my sisters, and she read it and she called me and said, if you want to make this film, you have to figure out a way just to raise money and make it and just stop doing this other thing because you don't seem to be really that into it. So I thought about it, and I took her advice, and I went off and raised money to make a film, which was not a documentary, but it was a narrative feature. And I had an interesting experience doing that. This filmmaking is one field where you learn by doing. And it also struck me as a place where there's complete accountability on the job. And I worked in corporate America where you basically needed to commit murder in order to get fired from a job. You could be downsized or you could be laid off, but to lose your job for incompetence almost never happened. But in production and filmmaking, if you're not good at what you do, you can get fired on the spot, and people do get fired on the spot. And I actually really enjoyed being accountable for what I was doing and for what was going on in the production. And I also realized that a lot of the skills that I had developed doing business development were actually came in very handy as a film producer. I needed to be organized. I needed to be on top of things and following up with people. And I think most of all, I needed to care more than anybody else in order to get done what I wanted to get done. And it was shortly after I finished work on the first film that I started working on documentaries. And when I started working on docs, I realized that was what I never knew that I always wanted to be doing. And as Marcia mentioned, I got involved with a project called Kinderblock 66, Return to Buchenwald. And that was a story. We followed 4 men who had been liberated from the Buchenwald concentration camp as young boys. And we went back with them for the 65th anniversary of their liberation. And it turned out that the story that we made was about how they were rescued within the camp, how 1,900 young boys were put into a special barrack and taken care of in the last months of the Holocaust and lived. It's an incredible story, and I knew nothing about it before, but I wanted to be involved with this project because I had a colleague who was the executive producer, and when he told me about this, because his father was one of these boys, the Buchenwald boys, and he told me about this, and I said, whatever you need me to do, I want to be involved with this, because we don't have a lot of time to meet survivors and to hear their stories and to document their testimony. And so that film we made in 2012, I believe. And since then, 2 of the gentlemen have passed away, and the other 2 are quite old. And I was right that we were in really the last moments to document stories from people who lived through the Holocaust. And we were interviewing the youngest of the survivors. But they were old enough that they remembered what was happening. So unfortunately, we're living in a moment where the only survivors who are still alive are ones who were too young to really remember what they had gone through. And also, unfortunately, those who do remember are not always in a mental state where they can tell their stories.
Right.
So this was a very important film as far as I was concerned, both personally and professionally. And I learned, again, you learn by doing in this world. And I learned a ton about how to make a documentary. And from there, I started working on some other films. African Exodus, which, as Marcia said, is about asylum seekers and refugees from Sudan and Eritrea who have made their way into Israel. And then I also worked on this, I directed a film called Tree Men, which on the face of it doesn't seem like it has anything to do with the other projects that I worked on, because it's about the people who come to New York City every holiday season to live in their vans and sell Christmas trees. I know that you all are in Eastern Connecticut and you're not too far from New York City. So maybe some of you are familiar with how the city transforms every holiday season into a real Christmas village with people selling trees on every other street corner. And we followed one specific tree seller named Francois, who it turned out was the philosopher king of tree men. And he was a wonderful character, a great human being, a great person, who I learned a lot from, and I grew to really appreciate this ritual that I've never partaken in. I've never had a Christmas tree in my life, but I have come to really appreciate what it means to people. And what drew me into this story was I was working with a production partner, and we were working on something completely different. And he told me that he and his family were going to buy their tree that weekend. And I said, okay, that's nice. I didn't really think too much of it. And he started to tell me about how much their tree man meant to them. And the more he talked about their experience, the more I realized that that was a film. So fortunately, my co-director in that film bought his Christmas trees from Francois, the tree man, on 103rd and Broadway. And we ended up making this film about him, which was a fantastic experience. And I mentioned to Marcia that because I was involved with it, there had to be some sort of Jewish angle to the story.
Right.
And Francois goes every couple of days while he's here in New York to shower and change his clothes and get a meal. And the place where he goes, there's a woman who lives in the neighborhood who has basically adopted him when he comes to the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And of course, she's a Holocaust survivor. And again, this is what sort of another one of these happy coincidences that just, when we found that out, we're like, of course we have to add this into the film because it just adds another layer to the story. So I had made those films, and I had worked on a couple of other projects, and some hopefully will be finished at some point in the future. And with documentary filmmaking, sometimes you work on things that never see the light of day. And hopefully you work on only things that do get made, but sometimes you spend time, and I've spent a long time on some projects that may or may not actually be finished one day. But I had been working on a different project, and it was October of 2016 when I read an article in the JTA, the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, has a daily email blast with stories from around the Jewish world. Mm-hmm. And I saw an article that the headline was, Black rabbinical student leads army of moms against gun violence in Chicago. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. Let me delve a little bit deeper into this. And at the top of the article, there's a picture of this striking young woman named Tamar Manasseh. And I go on to read about the amazing work that she is doing to combat gun violence in Chicago, and the organization Mask, Mothers and Men Against Senseless Killing, that she created. And what really grabbed my attention was the part in the article where Tamar said that she is an activist because she is a Jew. And because she is a Jew, she felt that she could not sit back and just allow gun violence to continue. And I thought to myself, I need to meet this person. I need to talk to her. And I I knew pretty much immediately that I wanted to make a film about her. But I didn't know her, and I didn't really know how to get in touch with her. So I tried via social media, and I tried via her organization's website, and I sent her an email. I introduced myself as a filmmaker from New York City, and I said, I think that your story would make an interesting documentary, and I would hope that you would consider it. So she didn't respond immediately. She didn't respond to the social media inquiries. The email, finally, I got a response. And she said, thank you for your interest. I think my life is about as interesting as watching the paint dry, so I'm going to pass. And I wrote her back and I said, I respectfully disagree with you, and I hope that you'll reconsider. And that started this on again, off again correspondence between the two of us. And the on part was me reaching out to her, and the off part was sometimes she would respond to me and sometimes she wouldn't. But we spoke on the phone twice. And after I hung up each time, I thought to myself, she's even more incredible than I originally thought. And she didn't say no completely. She left me with just enough hope that I didn't give up. And at some point I wrote to her and I said, I'm going to, in a very non-threatening way, continue to cyberstalk you. And she said, okay, which again led me to think there's a possibility here. She's not dismissing me out of hand. And then one day I got a message from her on Facebook, and she said, I'm in Staten Island. If you want to meet, I can meet you right now. So as I mentioned, I live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know Staten Island is nowhere near the Upper West Side of Manhattan. But I wrote her back and I said, give me 2 hours and I'll be there. And I dropped what I was doing and I drove out to Staten Island and I sat down with Tamar and we had a great conversation. And at the end, she looked at me and she kind of shrugged her shoulders and she said, you know, I guess if you want to do this, we can make the film this summer when we go back out to the block. And that was pretty much it. Now, what I didn't know at the time, but Tamar has subsequently told me, when I responded to her and I said, give me 2 hours, she thought I wasn't serious about the project at all because she really had no idea how far she was from where I am. And now that she understands, and I've actually driven her from the Upper West Side to Staten Island, now that she sees it, she understands that she was a little hasty in her judgment. But I almost blew it in her mind because I lived too far from Staten Island. But that's essentially how the film ended up happening. And, you know, we then spoke for the next couple of months and worked on how we would start filming when school let out at the end of June. Because that's when Mass does most of its work on the block, is the summer. And honestly, until the day that I started filming, I was only 50% sure that it was going to happen. Like I always felt like, I don't know, she would give me an answer, but it wouldn't be completely committed. So until I showed up at her door with the camera person, I wasn't quite sure that it would happen. But once I did, once we started, like from the first minute, it was amazing. So the day before I started filming, I had booked a flight to Chicago. And again, I had no idea about anything in Chicago. So I booked a flight to O'Hare Airport because you go to Chicago and I know there's Midway and O'Hare, but I figured, all right, I'll go to O'Hare. That was a mistake. You have to go to, she lives on the south side of Chicago. You have to go to Midway. But I told her, okay, I'm landing really early in the morning. So would it be okay if I came to you at 10:30? And she said, can you come at 12? And I thought, I don't really have any place to go. I don't know anybody there and I don't really know how I would fill all of this time. And I said, here's what I'm going to propose to you. If I can come at 10:30, I just want you to get comfortable. I want to put a microphone on your shirt and I want to just have the camera rolling so that you can get to a comfort level just being on camera. And I said, you don't need to talk to me. You don't need to look at me. Just, you can do whatever it is that you're going to do. And whenever you feel like you want to talk, then we can talk. And she said, okay, that sounds fine. And I show up at her door and she says, let's go sit on the back porch. And she proceeds to give me a 2.5-hour interview. The first thing, before anything, she just sat down, the camera's rolling, and she just started talking. And it was, I mean, I knew, I was not going to have a problem making a 90-minute film about this person. And she was amazing. And what you see in the film is Tamar Manassa, unfiltered. I mean, that is who she is all the time. So that's the long-winded version of how this film came about.
Well, that's great, Brett. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's fascinating. And then you went to, and when you were sitting on the porch and she was sort of suddenly just talking to you, what was going on in your mind?
I mean, as a filmmaker, I thought, this is amazing. She's great. She's so smart, and her thoughts are so accessible to her, and her emotions are accessible to her. So it's almost like sometimes she speaks in sound bites. She's just so good. And I knew, she has opinions, and she has opinions on lots of things, and they're consistent. That's the one thing I discovered. When I watched the early footage, the first few days, she still says things today that are exactly what she said to me when we first started filming. So she is so secure in who she is and what she believes. And I think that really helps. That really helps her as a leader, and it really helps, for her to determine what it is that she wants to do. So once she started talking, I thought to myself, okay, I'm good. This is going to be good.
Oh yeah, I can see it being just so natural, and she's really a natural. I mean, that comes across in the film.
Yeah.
So, question for you: how did the people in the neighborhood react to having a camera crew there all the time? Like that had to be very weird for them.
I think to a certain extent they're used to seeing cameras there because Tamar has gotten some local media attention. It's usually news cameras that are there, but having me come regularly, and I spent that summer going back and forth from New York to Chicago, and I would spend a few days there at a time. I never felt anything but welcome there, and the people could not have been more friendly to me. And I really think that has a lot to do with the fact that I was there with Tamar, and I had Tamar's seal of approval. So because I was okay with her, then everybody else sort of gave me a pass and allowed me to do whatever it is that I was going to do on the block. And I also think it has to do with the type of filmmaker that I am. I didn't have a big crew. I had a camera person who did sound. We didn't have a separate sound person. There were two of us. The crew was 2 people. I did not want to go into her work area and disrupt things. My style is I like to blend into the background, and I want to observe the reality. I'm not there to orchestrate anybody's reality. I wanted to present as unvarnished of a picture that I possibly could. And the way that I do that is just by not getting too deeply involved in the action. I want to, like I said, I blend into the background, and we follow her with the camera. We follow the action with the camera, but we're not trying to dictate what's going on out there. So I think, people got comfortable when they saw who I was, when they saw what we were doing. We never had any problems there at all.
That's great. That's amazing. And it was very seamless. When I was watching it, because this is the second time I watched it, and it was just seamless. Like I kept thinking, "Where's Brett?"
You know what? I'm in there a couple of times. You can sort of see me in a couple of scenes because you can't just stand on that block and not do anything. There's always some work that needs to be done, whether it's taking food out from somebody's car or helping to sweep up or manning the grill. There's always something. So you can see me a couple of times in the film doing.
So now I'll have to watch it again.
Doing some work behind the scenes. Yeah, exactly.
So one thing that struck me when I was watching it, especially when they were in her kitchen, she and her son, and they were sort of bringing all this food out, and they're going to feed the neighborhood. And I'm thinking to myself, where does she get the money to feed an entire neighborhood. And
Yeah.
it happened a lot. Like, so
Yeah.
what's the financing like? Where does she get her funding? That's amazing.
So she gets her fundings from donors, from individuals, from small, she gets small donations. She doesn't get money from the city, the state, the federal government. She gets money from donations. And every day in the summer, there are other people who sign up to deliver a meal or to sponsor a meal. So that's how that organization runs. It's grassroots. It's DIY, DIY, do it yourself.
DIY, do it yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And in the beginning, she was coming out of her pocket too.
That's what I wondered, because when you started filming, this was already 3 years in.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, so maybe she's already been getting some funding.
Yeah,
like
that's
some,
exactly right.
But how did she do it in the beginning? How was she?
She was
Because I'm
pulling
sure
money.
she was feeding people.
Yeah, she was pulling money out of her sock, and she was pulling money out of wherever, and she was just doing it.
Whoops, I lost you.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So another question, and I'm gonna let some people start asking questions, but I'm gonna ask you one more. Can you talk about the decision you made, I assume with her, obviously, to include the trip to the Carolinas? That was an interesting way to sort of transition a little bit, and then you brought it back. And then the next thing is pretty much, we wound down with April's Pesach and then
Passover, yeah.
October. So it was an interesting transition. I'm wondering how that came to be.
So when I started work on this, I had no idea that we were going to do anything like that. I mean, just not at all. One of the first few weeks that I was out there, she started talking about how she has family in Mississippi. And again, I don't know very much about people's histories, and I assumed that she wouldn't think very highly of Mississippi. And I asked her, I said, what do you think about Mississippi? And she said, I love it. I go there all the time. And when I'm there, I feel like I'm wrapped in a warm blanket.
Wow.
And that's because she has family there and she has roots there, and she feels that she wouldn't want to live there, but she likes going there to connect with her family. And the more I worked on the project, the more I realized how important her family ties are to her. And not just with her children or with her mother, but with her ancestors. And she says in the film that she's really into genealogy, and she really is into genealogy. And she feels this strong connection to her ancestors. And I thought, this explains a lot of who she is. And I would like to, actually, the first thought was to go down to Mississippi with her. But her mother was turning 70 that year, and she decided that she was going to take her mother to the Carolinas to do some research. Because her father's family is from Mississippi and her mother's is from the Carolinas. So when she told me this, I said, well, we're going, right? And she said, yeah, of course. Of course. So we ended up taking the same cameraman, Dan Coleman, who we use in Chicago. And we all flew down to the Carolinas. I flew from New York and they flew from Chicago, and we met up there. And we went on this trip for like 5 days, which was really intense. I mean, there were a lot of emotions that she expressed there that her mom expressed, and some of them are in the film. We had a longer version of this trip at one point in the cut, but it was, and most of what was taken out was just more of her getting angrier about the Confederate monuments that she would encounter, or that we all encountered. But it was a really intense visit, and it was really important, I thought, to explain where Tamar gets the strength from. And to me, it's about understanding the word that I keep coming back to with her is resilience. And she's a really resilient person. And where does this resilience come from? And it comes from these stories that she grew up on, hearing about her family and knowing what they had to overcome. And she says it in the film that she feels like she can't be ordinary because so many people had to sacrifice so much just for her to live, just for her to have a regular life. Mm-hmm. So she feels that she owes it to them to live more than a regular life. And I felt that was something that really needs to be put into this film, even though it takes the viewer out of the neighborhood and away from the block and away from Chicago. But to me, it explains who she is. And
Yeah.
sort of like then you swing back to the Passover Seder, which I thought was a good way to sort of, put a bow on the story.
That was a great way.
So thank you.
And the Carolinas definitely gave her another dimension and another level.
Yeah.
They gave that to the audience.
Yeah.
Which was great. So I'm going to open it up for people to ask questions. You can put them in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself, or just, use the raise your hand thing, and then we'll call on you so that people aren't talking over each other. And while I wait to see if anybody has a question, I can ask one more. Oh, wait, I've got one. Aaron, go ahead.
Okay, so Brad, tell us a little bit about Tamar, what she does in the winter, or what she does. It sounds like she does this project from 4 to 8. What does she do in the morning? What has she been doing prior to this? And what does she aspire to be doing sometime in the future?
Yeah, great question. So this has become her life. This is what she does. So even though it's 4 to 8 in the summer, it's really every day is prepping for that 4 to 8. And then winding down after that 4 to 8. So this has now turned into her full-time job. And she had done things before, and she was a rabbinical student, and she, I believe, was in real estate before then. But now mask is her life. And I'll give you a little bit of an update as to what's happening on the block, because the block has physically changed, and you can see the changes were happening already while we were filming. And it started out this empty lot, and then there were benches, and it was paved over. It's been transformed even more since then. 2 years ago, I think, the city of Chicago decided to shut down the high schools in Inglewood, and they were going to move the existing high school students to other schools, but outside of that neighborhood. And Tamar, who is a native Chicagoan, understood that when these things happened, a lot of kids just stopped going to school altogether, because when you have to cross invisible gang lines from one neighborhood to another, some kids would rather not go to school at all in order to avoid any sort of confrontation. Mm-hmm. So Tamar got shipping containers that she was in the process of converting in order to set up vocational training for older kids, for older teens on the block. But then Corona happened. And one of Tamar's cousins said to her, "Well, Noah, you built the ark and now it's raining." And she converted that learning center into education centers for younger kids, where children whose parents either are working, in what they call essential workers, or don't have the resources at home, where they don't have high-speed internet, or they don't have tablets or computers, where kids can make sure that they don't fall even further behind, because like everywhere else, Chicago public schools were remote for a year. So there was a lot of need for this. And that's really what Tamar has been doing since the pandemic. It's, I think this week may be the last week of in the informal schooling on the block, and then they're going to get ready for the summer again. But of course, last summer, there wasn't, they didn't have dinner every night because of the coronavirus. So it's been an interesting time. Tamar, also to give you a little bit of an update, she is going to be ordained as a rabbi at the end of July 24th. A long time coming. It was supposed to have happened in last December, but again, Chicago went on lockdown for a second time, and Tamar decided that she was only going to do an in-person ordination and not a virtual one, because she deserves to have people there to watch her. And that's going to happen now. So, she's been busy. She's kept busy over the course of the pandemic.
It sounds like you stayed in touch with her.
I talk to her at least once a day.
That's great. That's
at least, sometimes multiple times a day.
Seema, you go. Seema Stein has a question for you, Brad.
Brad, thank you so much for doing this and bringing and letting us find out about this project. One of the things that I found really startling, and Tamar noted it, was the fact that while they were having all of these events and there were crowds on the corner, the police was significantly absent, ignoring or not involved, but were kind of lurking in the background, waiting for things to go back to normal, if you will. Has there been a change in that, or is she taking that on as well?
You know, that's a great observation. The first day we were filming, if you remember, there was a police officer at the first day, and he was standing on the corner, engaging with people and having a good time. And I'm watching this, and I thought, oh, this is great. Look, there's a policeman interacting with people, and it's wonderful. And I went up to Tamar after we finished filming, and I said, I think this is fantastic. And she looked at me and she said, you'll never see him again. And she was right. He never showed up again. And I talked to him that day, and I got his card, and he didn't belong to the precinct that is in that neighborhood. He was one over, like one precinct over. So she said, you'll never see him again. They don't really have good relations with the police. The police do not enter into neighborhoods like Inglewood as partners or as protectors, but they're oppressors. And I'm sorry to use that word, but I've seen enough of it myself. I've witnessed it firsthand to know that it's true. This area is, to say over-policed is an understatement. There are police cars everywhere, and it feels heavy. It's not like my neighborhood. I'm sure it's not like the neighborhoods where you live. There needs to be a reimagining of what community policing looks like, not only in Chicago, but in many, many cities. But the police don't live in those neighborhoods. They come in from the northern suburbs. They come in from other places. They don't feel connected to those neighborhoods. And that shows itself in how they relate to the people there. Mm-hmm. And I personally watched young people getting harassed by the police for doing nothing. I was sitting, we weren't even filming. This was after filming. I went to visit Tamar 2 summers ago. Again, this is before COVID, the summer before COVID. And she and I were sitting in one of the shipping containers. It was a hot, hot August day in Chicago. And we were watching these kids in a car. They were sitting on the corner right in front of the lot in their car, probably just sitting in the air conditioning car. They weren't doing anything. And the police car rolled up and took them both out of the car and handcuffed them to one another. And Tamar and I walked over. We're still on the lot, and there's a fence around the lot. We're on Tamar's side of the fence. And Tamar said, what's going on? And the cop said, are you interfering with police business? And she said, how could I be interfering when I'm on my side of the fence and you're on that side of the fence? And we just stood there and watched. And we watched them harass these 2 kids and then leave. So that, to me, is sort of representative of what the relationship between the police and the community looks like there. And it's disturbing. It really is.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Arlene?
Thank you.
Unmute, Arlene.
Yeah, I just did.
Yeah.
Brad, was Tamar born Jewish or did she convert?
So in the film, Tamar says very clearly, her story is this: her mother pushed, she came out, she was Jewish. We generally don't, Tamar sometimes gets asked the question about her Judaism, and it's interesting because nobody ever asked me how it is that I'm Jewish. And Tamar doesn't answer that question because she feels that a Jew doesn't ask another Jew how it is that they're Jewish.
But she's black and you're white.
That is true, but and I think from an Ashkenazic Jewish perspective, where most people who ask that question are merely curious. But from Tamar's perspective, who has been hearing this since she's a child, it's not an innocent, it doesn't sound to her the way that it sounds to us. And it feels to her that it's gatekeeping, that it's white Jews saying only white people are supposed to be Jewish, black people aren't supposed to be Jewish. So Tamar doesn't answer that question, and I'm not going to answer that question because out of respect for her.
Is her family in Mississippi and the Carolinas? Are they Jewish, or is she like the majority of one?
Well, she's not a majority of one. She's a minority of several, but her family in Mississippi is not Jewish. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have another question. What do you and Tamar hope that people will take away from the film?
I think that I can speak for both of us when I say that I want people to watch this film and to think, I can do something too. Anybody can do something. Not everybody has to be Tamar Manasseh and start Mask or start some big organization, but anybody can do something small to help improve the life of their community, whatever community they live in. And you know, Mask exists in other places around the country, but it's not because Tamar says, well, I'm going to go here, or I'm going to go there, or they need me here. It's people from those places raising their hand and saying, I want to start a Mask chapter here. What can I do? And she will say, I'll help you, but you're the only one who knows the needs of your community. I can't tell you that what works for me is going to work for you. So she works with other people to help figure out what it is that their particular community needs. And I think that's the takeaway, that everybody can do something.
Does Tamar have any plans to run for office? It came up in the film.
Yeah.
And she kept poo-pooing it. And then she was sort of kind of like what she probably did with you when you were talking about doing the documentary. She kind of goes back and forth.
Yeah.
Has she sort of leaned a little more?
Well, right now she's leaning a little bit more away from it, especially after the most recent elections. And it's just politics in the U.S. is pretty toxic right now.
Yes, it is.
And Tamar still has some big ambitions, and she thinks that she can get done some of the things that she wants to do without having an R or a D after her name, or, you know, she wants to sort of go above politics or sideways in politics, whatever. I don't want to, you know, put a value judgment on whether she's here or whatever, but she wants to do this without politics for now. But, you know, in 5 years, maybe that answer will be different. But right now, I think she's leaning against. Yeah.
I think she's right. She could probably do more without being in politics right now.
Yeah.
Elise Landisberg has a question for you. Elise, go ahead. And then Karen, you're next.
Whoops. Got to get the camera and the mute right. Brad, you talked about talking to Tamar once a day, sometimes more than once a day. When did you finish this film? And tell me about how your filmmaking, and in particular this film, but your filmmaking in general, has changed you in your life.
That's a great question.
Big one.
I'm going to answer this. No, that's what I'm here for. I'm going to answer the second part first, because I feel like my life is, whoa, that's such a good question. I'm not the same person that I was when I embarked on a career in documentary filmmaking. And I think it's because of the people who I have been privileged to meet, whether it's Tamar or whether it's Francois, the tree seller, or whether it's a refugee from the genocide in Darfur or Holocaust survivors who are now in their early 90s. I have met incredible people who have unbelievable stories to tell and who have impacted my life personally and professionally. And I think more importantly, personally, that it just makes me a richer person to know people like that and to have. I think one of the greatest gifts that I get at being a filmmaker is that I get to have people like this in my life. So what right do I have to reach out to Tamar Manasseh and say, I want to talk to you, I want to meet you? The only right I have is because I have this documentary film thing that I could potentially help tell her story. And without that, I would read that article and think, this is an amazing person, and I wish I could know her. But what would the odds be? Excuse me. So I feel so fortunate to be able to tell these stories.
You can tell those stories because by virtue of the ways that these people have affected you, you can now share that with the rest of us and share the affect with a broader world.
I mean, in theory, yeah. And then in terms of when I think we finished the actual film, the filming in 2019, and then the post-production was basically through the end of 2019, and we premiered the film at the New York Jewish Film Festival in January of 2020. And you can forgive me for if my dates are a little bit messed up because the pandemic has just messed with my perception of what year we're in. We screened the film in public, so at a public screening before COVID. So it was January of 2020 was when we had the premiere. So we finished basically, the run up to getting the film ready for the festival was the end of 2019.
Okay. Karen, you can ask your question.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little more about why she picked that particular corner.
Yeah.
Was there significance to the corner?
Yeah, that was the street where Lucille Barnes was murdered in 2014, I believe. There was a young mother who got shot on that street, and the newscast said that she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what she was doing was she was breaking up a fight between two kids. And that really spoke to Tamar because first and foremost, Tamar sees herself as a mother. And she saw this woman who was doing what moms all over the world do, which is prevent their kids from doing stupid things. And while she was doing that, somebody drove by and she got hit by a stray bullet. And for Tamar, she didn't buy into the wrong place at the wrong time theory. She said, this is a mother who is momming, and she got hit by a bullet because she lives in a dangerous neighborhood. And that was why she decided to go to that block. And it was not far from where she grew up. Tamar grew up on the other side of Englewood, but she knew, she was familiar enough with the neighborhood where she decided that that's where she was going to go.
Thank you.
Okay, and Carla, you had a question about the congregation. You want to talk to Brad about that? No, okay, I'll do it. You're muted, Carla. Do you want to unmute?
Okay, we haven't watched the second half of the movie yet, so if this was covered, let me know. But I was curious about the history of her congregation. I probably very naively thought all the Ethiopian Jews went to Israel, and this was an Ethiopian Hebrew congregation.
Yeah, it's not. They're not direct descendants of Ethiopian Jews. It's a Hebrew Israelite congregation, and they call themselves Ethiopian because Ethiopia was never conquered. and that's why they identify with Ethiopia. But the congregation is over 100 years old, and there are different congregations around the country in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, a couple of other cities, I think, but it's over 100 years old.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then we don't really go further into it in the film, so I'm not, no spoiler
There's
alert.
no spoiler.
Okay.
Seema?
Um, Yeah, you talked about that Tamar is planning on doing things that have a greater impact, staying out of politics. This is part of that, setting up some kind of networking with other communities and sort of spreading this out even further.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that Tamar and I are doing right now, and there will be a follow-up to this film, by the way, it's going to be focused more on how Black Jews can serve as a bridge between the Jewish and the African American communities here. And one of the things that we're planning on is going to Atlanta this summer. Tamar wants to take a couple of busloads of people from Detroit and Chicago to go down to Atlanta to have an event, much like the Labor Day block party that we filmed, in front of the Georgia Capitol or somewhere nearby, where she wants to set up a tent and invite Jewish groups and Black groups, and to have a day where there's food and music, but also around the idea of voting rights, and to ensure that people don't lose that right in places like Georgia and in Florida and Texas. So that's one of the things that is sort of on her agenda right now. That's probably the biggest thing, other than mass chapters in different cities and people, because we've been doing these virtual film festivals all over the country for the last year. We've managed to build out a network around the country, and wherever we have the Q&As, people want to set up mass chapters. So Tamar has been working on setting one up in Memphis and one in Little Rock. And then there will be others after that.
That's great. Ron?
Okay. This was a wonderful film, first of all.
Thank you.
Felt like I knew Tamar. My question, and I guess it's almost like when Arlene asked about, I'm going to ask you what Tamar might think, or if she has any observations on the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, you've kind of skirted it, talking about some of the reasons, talking about the police there. And I know the film came out before the George Floyd.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, and as a African-American woman who lives in Chicago, I can understand the point of view. As a Jewish woman, sometimes there's a little bit of friction between the Black Lives Matter movement and the Jewish community. So I'm just wondering if she has any observations, or she's made any observations to you on any of this.
We do talk about lots of these issues all the time, and I would be misrepresenting our friendship if I said that all we did was talk about our kids and how the film is doing, because so much of what we talk about is current. But Black Lives Matter is a sort of this umbrella movement. It's not, you don't see like people walking around like it's sort of like Mask in a way. Mask doesn't have like members, right? You don't have like ID membership cards or what have you. Black Lives Matter is an idea for the most part. So I think that, again, not speaking for her, but knowing how she feels, she would probably tell you that she identifies with a lot of the beliefs that they have with regard to policing and rights for African Americans. uh, the more, I think you're referring to some of the positions traditionally on Israel, which was in the original, one of the original statements in 2016, which I believe has been removed. But there's no question that there's friction between the African American communities and the Jewish community, and that is part of the bridge building that Tamar wants to do, is to get people to just to know each other as human beings, and then we can maybe stop sloganeering and just understand, like, oh, wait a minute, I actually know Jewish people, or I know Black people, and I know that this person thinks this, and neither community is monolithic. Tamar tells a story of when the synagogue in Pittsburgh was shot up a couple of years ago, that the kids from the block reached out to her and said, "Are you okay? Are our friends okay?" Because they know that Tamar's Jewish, and they know that a lot of the people who come down to the block are Jewish. And it's only because of that human connection that they would even think to reach out to Tamar and say, "We hope you're okay. We hope our friends are okay." Our friends. I mean, that's the only hope we really have, is that if at a grassroots level, people get to know one another.
Agreed. Joan? Joan has a question for you about the family. Joan, you there? Unmute, Joan.
Yeah, it took me a while. Thanks. I was curious how this is impacted on Tamar's son. Does she have other kids, their friends, their community? You answered part of it just now with the community's concern about what happened in Pittsburgh and what happens to Jews in general. But, can you say a little more?
I'm not sure. What are you referring to? What you said that this is impacted. What is this?
How the film and
How the
all that's
film-
been going on and everything that's been going on with Mass, how it's impacted her family
Okay.
and the community.
Is that the question?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So Tamar has a son and a daughter, and the daughter you see a little bit in the film, but she's not identified, and that's primarily because she really wasn't around much that summer, so it was hard to work her into storylines because we just didn't have enough. But Max, who is her son, is there every day, as you saw, so it was easier to put him in there. And I think everybody's been pretty happy with how the film has been received, and they kind of already knew that their mom was like this force of nature, and that Max is one of the most quiet young men that you'll ever meet, and he's, I don't want to use the word shy, but let's just say introverted. So the attention that Tamar gets, he's totally in favor of it, as long as the attention is not on him. It's kept on her. And I think, everybody is happy to see that she's being recognized, and that the work that she's doing is valued, and that the work that is happening on the block is valued. It's not just Tamar, it's all of the people who are out there every day doing that work. Tamar is, of course, the most visible practitioner, and for good reason, but everybody is proud of the work that's being done there.
Thanks.
So we're literally at exactly just about an hour, but we have a few more minutes because we started a few minutes late. But I have a question, and I know I touched on it with you the other day, and I touched on it a little bit in the beginning, but I'm wondering if you can expound a little more.
Okay.
All the films you talked about that you have done have an Israeli or a Jewish theme.
Yeah.
Where, how, why how did that happen?
Yeah, that's just
part of by accident.
Yeah, no, it's not by accident. It's just it's a huge part of my identity. It always has been. My father was a refugee from Nazi Germany who came to the United States when he was a little boy. And that's something that we just grew up with, knowing, like, just being very aware of. and we went to Jewish day school growing up. I lived in Israel for 2 years after I graduated college, and really because I was slightly embarrassed that I went to Jewish day school for 13 years and my Hebrew was pretty bad. So I felt like I needed my parents to get their money's worth at least. So I went to Israel just so I could, I said, I'm not leaving here until I become fluent in Hebrew. And that's what I did. But I was doing other things too. But yeah, I'm only half joking when I say that. But Israel has always had an important place in my identity, especially since I lived there. It's become, and as you read earlier, I was the director of communications and a speechwriter at the Mission of Israel to the UN. So it's just something that is really a central part of my Jewish identity. And my Jewish identity is a central part of my whole identity. So it's just, these are the stories that I'm interested in. And, you know, I would like to say, well, maybe, you know, the next film I make doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be. It's just, it's what I gravitate to. It's what's interesting to me. And I feel that, well, if it's interesting to me, then maybe it'll be interesting to somebody else too. If I find it fascinating, then hopefully other people will find it fascinating. But these are the things that they just speak to me. They touch me. And
then you put it across in your film, so it's very well done. Yeah. I'd like to know if there's a way we can get access to what is it?
Kinderblock, yeah.
Yeah, Kinderblock 66.
You know, right now it's sort of we're trying to get it to Menemsha Films, which is where this film is.
Yes.
If we can do that, then it will be a lot easier for you to get it.
We'll put in a good word because we work with them all the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's happening. It's going to happen because my good friend who is the executive producer of that film, I said to him, time to leave your distributor and go to Menemsha because we can get this film out more into the world. Because it really, after it made its initial run, it's sort of, we had a distributor who I will not name names, but it was not great. And it's time to get this back out there. So hopefully it will be.
Oh, good. Yeah, because it sounds like a fascinating film.
Yeah, no, it's great. Great film.
So before we bid you farewell, because this has been so wonderful, and the film, Brad, was just really awesome.
I appreciate it.
Is there anybody who has any more questions before we bid this wonderful gentleman good evening? Going once. Going twice. Gone.
Thank you, everybody. This was a treat.
Brad, thank you.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Please give our best to Tamar.
I will.
Her we missed her. Yeah. And maybe there'll be another opportunity where we could have her come and speak to us.
Yeah, I think when we make the next film, we'll come to you.
Okay. All right. Sounds like a good plan.
Have a good night.
Thank you, and good night to everybody. Thank you all for being here.
Bye.
Lila Tov.
Lila Tov.
Thanks, Marcia.
You're welcome. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks, Marsh.
You're welcome. Good night.